Welcome in to another episode of the My Two Bits Gators football podcast. I am one of your hosts, Ben, joined as always by your other host, Mr. Randy. Randy, how we feeling tonight?
Man, we're feeling all right. Be happy to do another episode with you. Looking forward to this episode in particular as we get into apprehensions and anticipations. And in the meanwhile, trying not to get rained out with all this rain that's come through lately.
Yeah, man, I hear you. Hopefully it doesn't rain out fall camp. I think they'll do it anyway, but obviously getting excited for that to start tomorrow. Almost 32 days till Gator football. It's almost Christmas. We're getting close. Getting close. All right. Good stuff. All right. So with that, we will get right into it here tonight. No, it's not too much preamble. Pretty simple start to the show here. It is our apprehensions and anticipations for the 26 season, something we started doing every off season here as part of our cadence leading up to the start of this season each year. And at any rate, our intro for tonight is going to be pretty simple. Mission, after disclaimer, vision, and agenda, of course. Our mission to provide factual analysis of all things Florida Gator football. Our accuracy disclaimer is that our information will be accurate to the best of our possible ability. We will cite our sources whenever we use them, and all statistical data comes from either in ESPN or stats.ncaa.org, and recruiting data comes from on3.com. Our vision is to have unfiltered conversation around the product on the field, as well as recruiting and overall coaching decisions. Our analysis will be based on review of film, and while we will express opinion, that opinion should always be based in some form of fact. We will also evaluate strategy and tactics and discuss our observation of player personnel decisions, as well as on-the-field execution. All right, so as I mentioned, simple agenda for tonight: apprehensions for the season, anticipations for the season. Then we close it out, wrap it up. That is it. Sounds pretty simple, but as you'll see, we do have a few things to go over. So I will share here and show you our apprehensions first to get things started off. For those of you watching on the video version, that is, of course, but we'll run them down for those that aren't. So our apprehensions for tonight are the brutal SEC schedule that the Gators will have to navigate. Of course, every team does have the nine game schedule, but the Gators is a tough one for sure. We'll talk about it. We will talk quarterback ability and the potential concerns we have there. Some QB uncertainty, obviously, with the position itself. We will then look at the O-line concerns that we have. Of course, those we've already talked about, but we'll go a little more in depth. Then look at the roster turnover we had in the offseason, as well as any potential gaps that we do see. Defensive personnel concerns that we have. Special teams overhaul that happened in the offseason and what that might bring about, or concerns we have with that. And then lastly, some concerns with Summerall's history with an early loss. And I'll explain that when we get there. But wanted to show you all that first and share that as what we're going to go through. But I will stop that now and turn it over to you. Break down that brutal SEC schedule for us.
Yeah, man. So, there's been a lot of talk at SEC Media Days, of course, about the 9-game schedule and, of course, some whining going on. And then, of course, one coach in particular. Play anybody, anywhere, anytime, no problem. Reminds me of another quote, right? Spot the ball, but although I think this one came across a little better.
Either way, careful.
I digress. Here's the thing about this schedule, right? It's when it starts off like we talked about, Florida Atlantic. You've got Campbell, and then we get into Auburn, Ole Miss, Missouri. Then you have South Carolina. South Carolina, I believe, is our homecoming game, B.
I believe that's correct. Yeah.
Yep. And after that, you've got Texas, you got a bye week, Georgia, Oklahoma, and then Kentucky, Vandy, and the Criminals. So there's your season. So I'm going to focus really on 6 games in particular: a 3-game set, a break, and then a 3-game set. Mm-hmm. And with that, I'm going to focus more on Auburn, Ole Miss, and Missouri. So Auburn, here's the thing. Obviously, we have Alex Golish coming over, new coach, new QB, new staff, new system. But it's Auburn. It's Jordan Hare. It's at night. The place gets rowdy. And this is our first true road test for this group. So that's going to be interesting. Ole Miss coming back in the swamp on September 26th. It's back in the swamp. It's not Lane Kiffin's Ole Miss. It's Pete Golan's Ole Miss. And no disrespect to Pete Golan. Trinidad Chambliss is still going to be the gunslinger there. Obviously, we know how talented he is. What a find. What a find from a JUCO. Just unreal. So we know he's going to be good. At least we have the Swamp, that game in the Swamp to help there. And then Missouri. When to Missouri, October 3rd, we need to go, when you look at these games here, especially Missouri has always been interesting, a really favorite for us. Missouri is the Ozarks has not really treated the Gators well, and for whatever reason, Eli Drinkowitz has been able to get a lot more, right? Challenge us so much more, and clearly challenge the old Gator team in so many more ways than we even imagined. Having that been said, in that 3-game slate, we need to go at least 1-2, at least at a minimum, bare minimum. 2-1 is preferable, but 1-2, hey. And if we go 3-0, then it's going to be a magical season. But again, I'm not putting on the goggles, B. I'm not putting on the goggles. Just saying. Now, after that, we got a bit of a break. I don't say break, but a couple of games. Then we get ready for Texas. So Texas on October 17th. That is at Texas.
Yep.
With Sark, with Manning, who knows what they've got. We know they have a revamped class. They have a fully loaded class. They also have 2 former Gator coaches, Billy G., Jabbar Jaluk. A lot of familiarity, and I'm sure Sarkisian has that game circled because of what happened last year in the Swamp. So that is going to be what it's going to be. Then we've got Georgia in the ATL. We're the home team. Not really. It's in Atlanta. Okay, so there's Georgia against the Poodles. We'll see what happens there. Another tough game. And then Oklahoma back in the Swamp, right? So we have bye week, then Oklahoma Swamp. There's another 3-game stretch. We need to go at least 1-2.
Yeah.
We talked about ceilings and floors, regardless of what happens. If we're staring down the barrel of 8-4, we need to go 1-2 in those 3 different sets of games. But either way, when you look at the home play, and then you look at how some of these teams have reloaded, especially and all the other things happening around the SEC, those 6 games are going to be very crucial for the Gators to get their footing. It's going to be midseason. Let's hope injuries don't pile up. Let's hope things start to gel and click and we find pace after having 2 quote unquote, cupcakes to open up the season. So that's what I mean when I say, a quote unquote brutal SEC schedule. Yeah, it's a 9-game. Everyone's got it. But when I look at those 6 games in particular, my hope is that we go at least 2-4 in those 3 games.
Yeah, 2-4 would be good. Honestly, I think those are probably obviously where the losses are likely to come from in the schedule. I mean, certainly there are other places they could, but I think those are the likely places, right? Is in those 6 games, right? Those 3-3. I think it's a really good call out. They're critical. I don't know which is more important, finding a way to get to 2-1 in the first one, but then what if you go 0-3 in the next one, right? Like I guess it opens the door for that to happen, which is good, right? And still not be a terrible season. Because again, I don't know that going 0-3 in that second one is. You don't want to, of course, but
No.
is it really so bad? No, I don't know that it is. We'll do season picks when we do our season preview episode after next, and I still don't know how I'm picking those 6. Those are the 6 that I don't know. I know how I'm picking everything else, but those 6, I don't know. It's hard. It's hard. They're really tough to figure out where we can find the wins or where the losses are going to lie, right? It's tricky. It's tricky. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But I love that breakdown. I think it's a really good point to make. And obviously it really stands out as being the 2 tough little 3-game stretches that we have twice in this schedule for sure. So, all right, moving on, quarterback ability. So we want to take this separately because obviously we know we have some uncertainty that you're going to talk about in terms of who's going to start. But I just want to talk about some of the concerns I have with ability at the position a little bit. And some of this goes back to the experience point that I made last pod. We talked about this to some degree. But I guess what I would start off by saying is the conventional thinking here, and if you listen to a lot of current UF media, what you're going to hear is that, Faulkner brought over his QB, his guy, right, with him from Georgia Tech in Philo. And therefore, Philo would have the clear edge to be the starter, right? Especially having worked in the system for 2 years, understanding the language, at least elements of the playbook, even if things are going to change, which we anticipate they will, right, to some degree with what we're going to run at UF. But ultimately, the language and the system concepts, right, are still going to be the same. So when you look at that, okay. However, Philo was not highly ranked as a recruit due primarily to the lower level of competition that he faced in high school. He was Georgia 1A, Georgia 6A, much like Florida is the highest level of competition. And even though Trammell was much more highly ranked when we look at the profile, we don't have much film on either of these guys in college anyway to really tell us if either of them is actually good, right? We really just don't know is what I would say, right? There's really just not enough in high leverage, high quality opponent situations, right? To say, okay, yeah, this kid's good, right? Now, this isn't to say I believe either are poor QBs. I'm not saying that. But if you buy the narrative, it's Philo will be good. It's like a conclusion that's already been drawn. So if Trammell wins the job, he's just better, right? That's the narrative currently out there. Again, in at least Florida media circles. I would submit that could be true. But how do we know that Philo just isn't okay, right? Just serviceable, just right on that middle of the road. And if Trammell wins, he's just a little better than that, right? And there's a significant difference from, okay, Philo's good and Trammell beat him out, to Philo, well, you know, he'll do, and Trammell just edged that. That's two very different stories there, right? Again, these are unknowns. I don't know which one is the case. I don't know if either is the case. Maybe there's a third world I'm not even looking at. Unknowns. A lot of them, and we shouldn't be overlooking them. We shouldn't just be taking things for granted. We shouldn't just be making assumptions that we do know what the story is. So, food for thought, things to consider. That's what we do here. You know, this is the depressing part because it's our worries, right? It's our apprehensions. We don't mean to depress you too much, but we do want to, again, be transparent, be real, call a spade, right? All those things that we've been talking about all year. We're going to keep doing them. We're going to do our best with them. So any thoughts on that before you move on to QB uncertainty? I know it kind of fits into what you're going to talk about. So,
well, it does, but from some different perspectives. You know, it's almost like saying, which is the greater of two evils? If this guy's subpar, this guy's subpar, is this guy just a little bit more above subpar, or, you know, how do you? And that's the other thing too, right? Look at, we're August 4, folks. We're recording today, August 4, and who's the starter?
Might not know till 5 minutes before game time. That's what Johnny said.
Right. So that is what it is. So you've got, you know, that was a very interesting take as far as the ability. So I'll take it from the perspective of just pure uncertainty, right? When I look at this, I say, what's going to happen when I look at an advantage? What creates an advantage with our QB room? Well, Trammell's been here. So Trammell has an advantage because he has a little bit more chemistry with certain receivers. He's had time. There's been reps. There's some familiarity there. There you go. Right? So Trammell's got an edge from that perspective. I believe Trammell has an edge from the physical side of things and from the strength side of things. I think those things have been made obvious. I like what you said as far as, yeah, Buster got his guy, right? Because theoretically, let's say Haynes King moves on, whatever the case might be. Philo was supposed to be the successor to Haynes King. And Faulkner got the opportunity to work with him on the sidelines for 2 years and it's like, you know what, this is going to be my guy. There are some people who might, you know, I've heard this narrative that we should have gone into the portal, made a bigger splash at QB. Our OC, to your point, got his guy. This was his guy, was going to be his guy at Georgia Tech, and he brought his guy. I think what a lot of people did not anticipate was the fact of, oh, the other guy that was already here that was from a high school that's 78 miles away was actually pretty good. And he's picking up the offense pretty decent. He's picking up the schemes. Okay. So now it's a matter of what does that translate to as far as chemistry, as far as rhythm? Because I don't think the spring game was a very clear indicator of that, right? Clearly, Trammell had a better, quote unquote, spring game. His arm flashed more. There was more opportunities downfield. No question there, right? But the other thing that I think we spoke to is the fact of we need a quarterback that is above serviceable, that is a field general, that can control how this team moves down the field, that makes smart decisions, that makes the right throw. And at the end of the day, we do not need a Heisman candidate quarterback to do so. It needs to fit into the system. Buster needs to meld and weld and wield certain things around him in certain packages to make it work. Now, having that been said, I look at Florida over the years. Is it possible we can employ a 2 QB system? There's that term, right? Spurrier did it a few times, in fact, a handful of times. Okay? Meyer did it. Of course, when Leak was phasing out, Tebow's coming in. But outside of that, believe it or not, Summerall had to do it at Tulane, right? Mensah was a clear starter, right? And then Thompson was coming in on a regular basis with certain packages, particularly in the red zone or in short yardage situations, right? So do we have room for a 2 QB system? I don't know. That's the uncertainty. And because we have an opportunity to introduce a 2 QB system, does that affect anything as far as gelling, continuity, rhythm, and all these other things, right? So that's my part of the uncertainty, is the fact that we don't have a QB named. Could we go into week 1 with a 2 QB system? And what does that do for the overall stability of the QB room and the offense that Buster Faulkner has envisioned moving forward?
Yeah, that's a lot of fair questions there. A lot of questions, but it's a lot of fair questions. Again,
a lot of questions. Yeah.
The unknowns continue, right? And we knew this was going to be a big part of this when we went through and talked about all this stuff, just because of all the unknowns that we have, and those are going to continue. So at any rate, I don't know. I don't have those answers. Let's talk about some more unknowns. O-line.
Hey.
This is the big one, right? This is the 800-pound gorilla. That really everybody is talking about, everybody is concerned with. I still can't figure out where I'm landing on this. I guess I hope to know more during fall. I hope we can get some intel. We will discuss what we're learning from fall on our next pod, but we'll talk about that later. I really hope that we can find something here that works. So I'll start with a positive. I loved hearing John say at Media Days that the O-line had a great summer in the weight room, and that is going to make a big difference of what they're capable of during the season, right? And perhaps more importantly, it can potentially help with the I word risk, right? Because one thing we don't have in this room is depth, right? We do not have a group of guys behind the starters, certainly, that I feel super comfortable or confident with them getting a bunch of run, right? Certainly not getting into the third level, right? But from a first team standpoint, I'm not sure how I feel. From a second team standpoint, it definitely gets shaky, and then I don't know if we have 13 guys. So, which you could say that about a lot of teams. It's not just us. But at the end of the day, in terms of the third team, let me be clear. But at the end of the day, the fact that even the first team stuff is questionable is, it starts to get shaky. So having said what we just said about positives, because there is a positive there, again, the weight room stuff is big. Like, that's great to hear him say how pleased he is with their progress. It's a big deal. But we still don't know who at least 2, possibly 3, and from what I've read today, maybe it's even 4 of our starters are going to be, depending on where you look, on this line. We certainly have a guy we believe in at O-line coach, right? Lake Trout, Big Philly style, whoever we're going to call him, I believe in him. I think he's going to do some things, right? But so much of the O-line, as we have also talked about, is cohesiveness. It's playing together. It's understanding what the guy on your left and right, if you have one on both sides, are doing, depending where you are on the line. And you just cannot You cannot be great at that if we are still figuring out who the starters are multiple weeks into fall camp. So here is my hope. My hope is that this is something we can get addressed quickly, that Phil is able to bring the right group together early on in camp and get them to execute. But I would be lying to you through my teeth if I didn't tell you that I am very unsure if that can happen and that this isn't a real concern. The ability of this O-line to play at a competitive level, not an elite level, a competitive level, is critical. We have talked about it and talked about it. We talked about this last year and the year before. It is the most important position group as a whole in my position on certainly offense, possibly the football team. Not a single player, but altogether, it is the most important position group, right? Because it is the only one where all five guys got to play as one, have got to do that executionally, right? Last year was actually a great example of this, right? We had a second-round pick All-American center, a third-round pick All-SEC tackle, and yet we were not a good offensive line. We ended up, by the end of the year, being below average, but not, approaching average, but we were not good by any stretch of the imagination. Despite the fact that we probably should have been, we weren't. And yet we had two guys go in the first 3 rounds of the draft and be named All-American and All-SEC. Something to consider, right? So again, good players do not make a good O-line. That's the point that I'm trying to make. They have to be able to do it together. We have to be serviceable here, as John said, or we are going to get our donkeys kicked. Use a different word there. Okay. That's what I got for you on O-line. Moving on.
Yeah, I unfortunately share the same concern. I guess the main thing is, obviously, when you look at a lot of coaches, we consolidated 2 O-line coaches. We've had 2 O-line coaches under Napier's tenure. Now, with Lake Trout getting in there, obviously we believe in him and his abilities. I will say this, the 2 positives that have come out of the O-line since spring. The first is, you touched on one of them, the weight room game. To hear John come in and say the strength at O-line was underwhelming, was a massive indictment. Just a massive indictment, which indicates it, which spoke to exactly what you just mentioned regarding, hey, we had 2 great picks, we had some great talent up there, couldn't do anything as a unit. And the second thing was, which is neat to see, is Moore and Shanahan taking that leadership role and really bringing up the level of play in the O-line. So hopefully that does translate well going into the next couple weeks here.
Yeah, and liked hearing them called out too as being leaders in the room, so that's good.
Very much so. All right, let's go. Next apprehension. Roster turnover and gaps. So, couple things here. Spring portal. Remember the spring portal? No, you don't, because there wasn't one. So
I remember it from last year.
Yeah, last year, right? But we did not have a spring portal. We did not have a secondary opportunity to address certain gaps, right? Where are those gaps? The 2 specific gaps that I saw, or that we saw, B just mentioned, O-line. O-line was the main one. And then the second one, no pun intended, was the secondary, right? When you look at some of the question marks, a lot of the question marks that we had in the secondary coming out of last year. So integrating over 50 new faces, right? And train stories behind a very thin projected depth of starters is just tough, especially in particular going back to the O-line. Only 2 that returned on the O-line have ever started at O-line for this team in the past. So that is crucial. The other thing is, with this secondary, we talked about the defense of old, the scheme of old, bend, don't break. We know Brad White has some different techniques, some different skills, and some different packages. That's great, but we have seen him use some of those simulated pressures in the past. We'll see what happens if he introduces the same thing here at Florida. We know Big Papa Ron was very sim heavy, right? Especially when you look at a lot of linebackers scrambling in coverage. So how does that affect the secondary? Puts a lot more stress on the secondary. They need to be on a swivel. So that's why we had hoped we can build up a little bit more depth in the secondary. But guess what? We're going to have to do it the old-fashioned way. Train them, coach them up tough and hard and good. And that's the other thing, too. Like, when you look at our turnover, I say over 15 faces. We retained about 60. I think right now in the squad, there's roughly 115 players as the roster dropped, I guess, last night or this morning. Obviously, we didn't have as much as Florida State, right? Florida State had 60-plus leave, right? That is what it is. But this is where the coaching, the system, the culture, that C word, comes into play. And so when you look at the message from the coaching staff and everything else, that's what needs to permeate the whole team. You've got two different examples of transfer portal classes, right? You look at what Lane Kiffin has done, transfer portal king, whatever, and what he did with that class last year. And then you look at just up north of us, the Criminals, and what happened with their transfer class. There was zero glue holding any of those kids together. So that's what happened. So at the end of the day, yes, we have some competent people. Yes, we've got good talent. But at the end of the day, that's still a great number. We had a great number of turnover in the roster. And that is always an apprehension when you look at things going into the fall.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very good point. It's definitely something that has to be considered. Again, reminds me of what? Unknowns, right? And when you stack too many unknowns, it does get to be a problem. But I don't necessarily know that we're in that circumstance, but we could be, right? We have to consider that. This could be a situation where there are just too many of these and they start to stack up and they become a problem. We'll see. Time will tell. There are concerns here, though. All right, next apprehension. Defensive personnel concerns. So you touched on this just a little bit there, which I'll extend some of that point.
Please do.
But I'll start off by saying an anticipation that I have is that that I will talk about in a bit is what Brad White and Summerall can do together with this defense. However, more than once, concerns about the secondary have come up as talking points for John in a press conference. And if we look at where this roster sits, I can see why. Again, you just mentioned it. We needed a spring portal. We needed to bring a couple more guys in. We got a couple guys in the winter portal that I think might be good, but the spring would have been helpful just to add some depth, to add maybe one or two more playmakers, right? There were just some things. So break this down. We'll look at corner. We'll look at safety. Looking at corner first, depth is a concern. Word is Dijon got his knee scoped in the offseason, had a meniscus thing, I think.
Yes.
He's not fully healthy. He is not likely to start camp fully healthy. I think that's almost known at this point. So it will have to be something we keep an eye on. We will give you an update when we give you that fall camp update upcoming. But it is definitely something we have to watch because he is definitely projected to be a starter. But if he can't go, I don't know, right? Even without him, the experience we have at corner outside of Cormani is pretty lacking, right? Because that's the real concern. Now we have some talent, but experience is less. So this is a position that can typically be okay without a ton of game experience if the talent is there. And I would say we have the talent. Hanks and Flowers, right? We talked a ton about Hanks. I think he could have can and will compete for a starting job regardless of Dijon's health status. And Flowers showed he can play pretty well his freshman season too, right? At least in certain moments. Again, their consistency is going to be the key, what happens there. However, behind that, do Lowry, Conan Banny, the other guys that we have in that room, the freshmen that we brought in, do they have what it takes? CJ Brana, Hester, right? Do these guys have what it takes? I did just see where CJ Brana put on 20 pounds in the offseason of muscle. Pretty good stuff there. But do they have what it's needed if we have to rely on them because we get further down the depth chart? I don't know. That starts to get a little sketchy for me. So that's the concern at corner. Then there's safety, where I like Coleman and Thornton as starters. I think that's pretty well set now from what I've seen. But again, could be some movement with Dooley. We don't know. And then there's Shady Hayward and Drake Stubbs, not bad options. But other than Cam, again, lacking experience. Now, here is a position that experience matters for sure. We have seen that in the past. See Jordan Castell circa 2022 trying to play free safety as a freshman. He did okay considering, but there were some struggles, right? And there could have been some other reasons for that, but we'll see. I say all of that to make the point that I think John and Brad want to be creative in their scheme. Again, I'll talk more to this later. I think they want to do a lot of different things. There's a Miles Graham quote I will discuss later. However, I have real concern that they could be limited by our ability and our depth in the secondary to do some of these things that they would want to do. And that forces us into some more conservative approaches and potentially some issues in our back end scheme that could cause us to give up more yards in short to medium routes because we have to be guarding against getting beat deep in many instances. It brings you back to that bend, don't break a little bit like you were mentioning. Again, we don't know this. I love our corners coach, Brandon Harris. I love him. I think he's phenomenal. And I think he can get a lot out of this group. I like our safeties coach too, Corey Collins, I believe. But I do still have concerns that I'm not going to ignore when it comes to the secondary on this current roster. So there you go.
Guess what? Great. I mean, it's not a great apprehension, but it's
yeah. What's a great apprehension?
Well understood. Well understood. Gotcha.
Fair enough.
Moving on. I'm going to talk about special teams. Special teams overall. Right? Specialist positions in this league, when we look at hidden yardage, finding yardage, flipping the field, whatever you want to call it, we have to replace a place kicker, a punter, and a long snapper. All got left for the NFL and other great things, right? Replacing Trey Smack, Tommy Doman, and of course, Rocco Underwood. And
hey, those guys can come back now. They can play another year. 5 for 5, baby. I'm just kidding. They sign deals. They can't.
I was going to say, they're gone, but I wouldn't give up the money for that. But anyways. And then, of course, we have a new special teams coach, Jonathan Galante. And no, folks, he did not bring the mat with him from Tulane. So we got Patrick Durkin as our place kicker, transferred from Tulane, right? Named the American Athletic Conference, the AAC Special Teams Player of the Year in 2025. 25 of 28 field goal attempts. 4 out of 6 from 51 plus yards. Okay. Alec Clark transferred alongside Durkin as well from Tulane, right? Earning first team all AAC honors last year. Averaged 46.5 yards per punt, 70 punts last season. Also includes 16 50 yards or longer and 16 down to inside the 20. Very, nice. Very capable. And then you've got our long snapper, Carter Milleron, which nobody knows, but guess what? He comes to us by way of Louisiana. 44 starts. He missed his final 8 starts because of injury. He applied, got granted eligibility for a 5th season, and here he is. And Jonathan Galante, our special teams coach, did mention he's the most experienced player in the room, and having that, especially in the long snapper position, is critical for our special teams success. So completely overhauled special teams room when you look at player and coordinator. So there's an apprehension.
All right. Yeah, there's a lot of change, a lot of turnover, obviously things that concern. I do like the punting situation. Anytime you get a quality Aussie punter, you still tend to feel good about it, right? Those guys can usually kick. Durkin seems solid, but how does he react to the high pressure situations of an SEC room? You know, he has kicked in the CFP. That's cool, but it wasn't exactly high pressure. They were getting the snot kicked out of them by Ole Miss. So I don't know. Does that matter? I don't know. But I think I like Durkin. I'm not knocking him by saying that. I'm just saying, you know, how does the pressure work when he's got to step out there and try to make a kick, you know, and Jordan Hare, week 3. I don't know. You know, it's a thing. So good things to look at. All right.
Oof.
We'll see. Maybe. I think that is going to be a good game. I do. So, all right. Last apprehension here. And then we get to the fun stuff. This one's interesting. So, Summerall's early loss history, I alluded to it earlier. If John has a flaw in his very impressive win-loss record of 43-12, it is that he has shown a bit of a pattern in taking at least one early loss in seasons. So I went back and I looked at this because I just happened to catch it when I was looking through a couple of seasons. I don't know where they came up, but I just saw it and I was like, huh, that's weird. Huh, that's weird. And then I just saw it kind of repeating. So here's the breakdown. In his first year at 22 at Troy, he lost his first game, but to a much more talented opponent in Ole Miss. But then he lost again to App State in his third game. Now, it should be noted that App State is, of course, a quality team in the Sun Belt, right? Year in and year out. They're always good. I almost want to give a shout out there, but I won't. But still, I know somebody who played there. That's all I'm going to say. But I still not a talent disparity when he was working, like what he was working against with Ole Miss, right? The talent was comparable, right, to what he had at Troy, at least somewhat, right? And it was certainly classified as a winnable game, right, against App State if they didn't, even if they didn't make the conference title game that year. So that's the first one. In his second year at Troy in 23, he lost his second game of the season at Kansas State. Again, a Power 4 opponent, but one that only ranked 68 on the team talent composite, 247 team talent composite that year, in a season where Troy ranked 102nd. So a talent gap, certainly, but not one that was like totally insurmountable, right? He then lost to Cignetti at home against James Madison, but this was in his next game as well. Again, a team in his conference that was good, but this is one that ranked below them in talent composite at 141. Now, we know what Cignetti does, right? He takes his talent composite and he elevates it, right? Let's see the national championship last year. But it is Cignetti, like I just said. So that should certainly be considered then. Okay, moving on. 2024, Tulane. He lost his second and third games of the season, again to Kansas State and then Oklahoma. Ooh. Both Power 4 opponents, so we will give them that. But in this case, KSU was actually ranked below Tulane in the talent composite ranking, 62 and 64. Oklahoma was much higher at 7th, so that makes a lot more sense. And I will say the KSU game that year versus Troy the year before, much closer. However, still an early loss that I could argue, winnable game, right? That just saying, it kind of keeps happening. Finally, 2025 Tulane, John lost again to Ole Miss in his fourth game. Of course, understandable defeat, significantly more talented, but the trend did still remain. So I will say that last one was much more understandable. I don't have something where we had a tight talent gap in 25 that he lost to, but again, it's just something I got to call out. So was this just about the talent gap? I can't say that it was in all cases. In every year, there was a close talent gap game except 25, and there was also an early loss to a team that there didn't likely have to be. So is this something that Summerall's teams are going to demonstrate at Florida? I hope not, but it's a trend we can't ignore, and we have to watch it moving forward. See Auburn. Sticks out like a sore thumb.
I rest my case, Your Honor.
Pretty much. That wraps up your apprehensions. It's a little bit of a doozy, but it's something we are definitely going to have to watch. And again, maybe it has nothing to do with it. Maybe it simply has to do with the team talent profiles he was working with. Maybe that totally goes away now that he gets top 15 talent. I don't know. Again, unknowns. All right. Let's move on from some unknowns to some things we at least think we know. To that end, let's look at the anticipations for this season. So here is your breakdown for the anticipations. We have, first off, the Summerall effect, as you have labeled it. So I'll let you break that one down. Run the ball, baby. Then we'll look at the RB2 battle, defensive aggression, staff overhaul in a good way, the wide receiver group, restoring the swamp, and the OC impact of one Mr. Buster Faulkner. So those are your anticipations for the 26th season. Let's break them down. Get us started. What is the Summerall effect? Do tell.
Well, I'll try and give it some justice because every time that man steps to the podium, the energy, the enthusiasm is just absolutely palpable, right? And that's exactly what I mean by it. When I look at Billy Napier, first and foremost, is a good person. No, I'm not doing this in a therapy perspective. My name is Randy, and I do not hate Billy Napier. My name is Randy, and I was frustrated with the way Billy Napier used talent and also did not forego play calling ability. Anyways, I digress.
Or did not use talent.
Exactly. So the problem that I had with Billy, great guy, great family man. The players played for him, right? Especially when you look at what we did at the end of the 2024 season. Do not forget the end of that 2024 season. It was absolutely based off of the two things that Billy went viral for in the swamp after that game was hope and belief are powerful things. In Billy's coaching, as we know, there's a plus and minus world. And I know it's recorded a lot in basketball, but at the end of the day, in a plus and minus world, Billy's coaching was a minus. Billy's attitude, his demeanor, more on the stoic side, also contributed as a minus. Maybe he thought this was the calm, but at the end of the day, when you look at the Energizer Bunny that John Sumrall is, again, we've talked about as far as his energy and attitude. Is it real? Is it not? Is it going to fade off? Is it going to fizz? This is just who the man is, period. Yep. How much of a plus impact can John have on this team? With a palpable shift in culture, intensity, and leadership following the previous regime, right? Bringing a much needed emotional spark, right? When you embrace the high energy, demanding coaching style, that brings a much needed physical and physiological reset to the swamp, period. The level of confidence is huge, right? Major swag. And not to get mentioned, when I look at, as we know, there's arrogance, there's confidence, there's a lot of those terms being thrown out there, right? When you have an edge about you, you've got swag. I look at Major Wright in the national championship game against Oklahoma.
It's a dangerous precedent you just set, but all right, let's go.
I'm just saying, he had an opportunity. He came over as a safety, right? Delivered some brutal hits, but that ball hung in the air so long, he had the opportunity to intercept that ball, but he did not intercept the ball. He wanted to send a message to the entire Oklahoma team, especially the receiver corps, saying, you better watch out if you come downfield. Now, again, is that hit allowed today? But at the end of the day, he played with an edge. He played with a tone. He played with a specific type of chip that this team has needed for a long time. And guess what? John Sumrall is infusing that and reinfusing that into this class moving forward. Again, with Billy, they did play for each other. But with John, they're playing for each other and they're playing for the win. We're not just playing for each other. We're playing to keep the ball, protect the ball, right? And that's
what I think we're hoping for sure. I will see, but I think that's potentially the difference. I think you nailed it on the head, right? I do think we had good camaraderie, brotherhood, right? Culture that we talked about for so long with Billy. I think that it really existed. I don't think we were wrong about that, but you're right. There's a difference between having that and then also having an edge, right? And I think that's the difference is we had no edge. We had no competitive grit. We had but very little competitive grit. We had very little fire and intensity as a team when it came to a lot of different things. There were moments at times, perhaps, but it just wasn't, to a degree, you reflect the personality of your coach. You just do. And it was just lacking a lot. And I think that hopefully gets corrected now. If they reflect the personality of this coach, yikes. We better watch out for them unnecessary roughness penalties. I don't know. It's going to be difficult. But anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off. You got anything else there?
No, the only other thing I want to add was the fact of, besides the fact that he's just so quotable, so relatable. One of the quotes that I really loved. Yeah, he's talked about enthusiasm, attacking every day. And the main thing was that stuck out for me was the only disability in life is a bad attitude.
Yeah, I liked that one too.
Holy cow.
I like that one too. Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Holy cow.
And he seems to really mean that. Like that's not, I don't feel coach speaking that at all. I feel like he lives that, personally. And that's one of the things I do feel about him. That, you talk about the Summerall effect. It feels like all the stuff that he's saying and all those quotable lines and all those things that could just be coach speak, they're not to me with him. They certainly don't come off that way anyway. They come off as being not only genuine, but things that he does and are truly real for him, not just to him, but for him personally. And that's what I think makes him the guy that we've started to really embrace here so far. We'll see if that's able to continue. I really hope it is. Have a lot of expectations and anticipations for that, right? But yeah, no, I'm excited about it for sure. Really, really good points there. I liked that one. All right, moving on. Run the ball.
Oh.
Unfortunately, probably for the last year, we're going to start on a bit of a sad note here. I'm going to get it out the way. Despite this being in anticipation, this is almost certainly Jaden's last year with UF.
Yeah.
He already said at media days he did not enjoy the gauntlet. If you didn't hear that, Jaden did not like the gauntlet, folks. he did not have a good time running the gauntlet. Aside from his extremely high NFL upside as a prospect, I just, between that and the amount of money he could go make, I don't see where we get Jaden in 2027. I'd love it, but I don't see it. I just don't think it's happening. Maybe we'll see how the season goes. Perhaps he wants to come back. Maybe he'll have a shot to go for a Heisman or something, and he'll want to do that. We can hope, but I doubt it. So that makes this a probable contract year for one Jaden Baugh, as we've discussed in the past, right? The contract years, go get your money, right? I hope he gets to do that in a big way in Buster Faulkner's offense. So let's talk about where we're at coming in. Last year, as a true sophomore, let me reemphasize that, a true sophomore, 220 carries, 1,170 yards, 5.3 per carry, 8 rushing touchdowns, and just a shade under 100 a game at 97.5. Now, granted, that was bolstered by the FSU beatdown Jaden Baugh game, but I want to point out that in terms of the yards per carry rather than the yards per game, his longest rush all season was 26 yards.
Because
that's it. That. Well, true, but his longest run that counted was 26 yards, and he averaged 5.3 per carry. Are you kidding me? I would challenge you. There are very few backs that have his kind of carry volume that can say that don't have any kind of long carries at all to bolster their resume and have the number of yards per carry, and the number of 100-yard actual games that he had, by the way, because he had 5 at least. No, I think maybe it was only 4, because every time he had 100, we won. So must have only been 4. But still, 400-yard games. And his longest rush was 26 yards. Are you kidding me? That's nuts. He also had 33 receptions for 210 yards, 6.4 yards per carry, 2 receiving touchdowns as a part of that as well. So we've talked a decent amount about Faulkner thus far, and I will do so some more in a little bit here. But his ability to build an offense around the weapons he has on his team is something analysts, coaches, and players have all talked about. I'll talk about that again in a little bit. We have seen the film of Jaden taking wildcat snaps in the spring. For some reason, that's hard for me to say. We know he can catch out of the backfield. We certainly know he can run the ball. So it is absolutely thrilling for me to think about what can come out of this 26 season with what we already know Jaden can do, mixing with Faulkner's creativity as a coordinator. Last but not least, mix in the motivation that this is probably his last year, and you have the recipe for a monster season from Jaden Baugh loading in 2026. I am here for it. Let me see it. Bring it on. That's all I got.
Nice. I like it. To that, I will follow up with, who is RB2? So,
a valid question.
Yeah, obviously, Baugh's got the helm, but I'm more interested. Well, I should say more interested, but I'm curious about what's happening with the RB2 battle. So, for those of you who don't know, we have 2 backs at RB2. We've got Evan Pryor, who came to us from the Cincinnati Bearcats. And, of course, we have Duke Clark, who's going into his sophomore year. So, we know Clark is extremely talented, but Pryor has, as I like to say, scar tissue. But really and truly, the more he's the more seasoned back, right? He's got speed. He's got vision. He's got a really good mix of both. And not to mention, I will say this, in more of the film that I saw, he has a quicker first step than I thought. So I just want to throw that out there. Who wins the spot, right? We know it's going to be more than just Jaden, especially when you look at this offense and what Buster Faulkner would like to implore. And I agree with you. It's a contract year for Jaden, and more than likely his last year. So who steps up, right? At the end of the day, when you look at 2025, over at Cincinnati, Evan had 76 rushing attempts, 522 yards, good for 6.9 yards a carry, 3 rushing touchdowns, and a long run of 46 yards against Kansas State. He also added 10 receptions, 107 yards, so 10.7 yards a catch there. He is a red shirt senior, so he's done. This is his last year, more than likely. Duke Clark, 15 carries, 58 rushing yards, no touchdowns, averaged 4 yards a carry in his true freshman season. The thing about me is, when I look at this RB2 room, Pryor more than likely is going to have the edge here, but I love the fact that Duke Clark had a role model and a mentor in Jaden Ball to model after. Because I tell you what, it was really neat to see Duke come in a couple games last year, no gloves on, had the fingers taped up. Jaden had the fingers taped up. Duke Clark was following Jaden around like a little brother, right? So it was really neat to see that. Hopefully a lot of that goodness rubbed off on him. And so for me, the battle's going to be truly at running back 2, because that running back 2 spot is going to translate into the 2027 season. And so more than likely Pryor's got it, but let's see if Clark can really build some momentum this year, have a really solid sophomore season, and take that into 27.
Right. And, things we don't want to talk about here, especially in anticipation section, but you never know about the I word, right? Yep. You never know. So, and we're not saying it because it's apparently bad luck to say it. I don't know if I believe in that or not, but there's a lot of stuff floating around out there. So anyway, if you don't know what we're talking about, Google it. All right. Because we're not going to say it. Okay. Moving right along. Next up, defensive aggression. All right. I alluded to this earlier in the apprehension that I had, but here's the anticipation. So I seriously don't know if anybody is talking enough about the defense right now for Florida. It seems like all the discussion has been focused around Faulkner and the offense. And hey, I get it, right? But we need to talk about this defense. It does seem like maybe in a few UF media circles lately, there's been a little bit of coverage. But again, it's been mostly on the offensive side of the ball. So, Randy, you mentioned in a previous pod that Summerall's teams, as him as the head coach, meaning 2 at Troy and 2 at Tulane, led all FBS programs during that time with 97 turnovers in 4 seasons. I double-checked that. That is correct. The next closest was a 2-way tie at 95. So clearly, he has found a way to get his teams to be aggressive, right? You don't turn the ball over 97 times in 4 seasons. That's almost 25, right, per season average, without being pretty aggressive. Another fun stat to add here is that the lowest single-season turnover for any of those teams was 22. Right. So he really did average that. It wasn't like he had 35 one year and then, average way less. No, 22 was the low mark. So just throwing that out there. But it's not just about John. We also need to look at the D coordinator, right? Brad White is going to be heavily involved here, as John has said. It's his defense to run, right? And this may be the reason that we haven't heard more about the defense. Not because Brad isn't a good DC, just because it's a little unknown how this is going to look paired with Summerall as the head coach. But I would argue we do have some evidence for this. So if we go back to when John and Brad worked together at Kentucky, they were part of a coaching staff that had some pretty impressive defenses. Much as we know, I don't like Kentucky, right? Everybody knows that. But you know what it really is? I was thinking about this when I was writing this section. I don't really care that much about Kentucky one way or another. I just hate losing to Kentucky in football because we should. That's just it. That's all it is. It's all I got. So that's where the Kentucky factor comes from. I just don't like losing to them in football. That's all. Other than that, I really don't care. All right, moving along. 2019, first year John and Brad worked together on a defense. 14 ranked scoring defense nationally. Kentucky, 19.3 points per game, and a talent composite on 247 of 34th. That's a pretty good year. 2020 fell off. They did have several players go to the draft and some just graduation departures as well. They dropped to 45th nationally at 25.9 points per game allowed, and actually moved up in total talent, but that was from like incoming freshmen and guys that weren't necessarily playing right away and things of that nature. They moved up to 26th. So I do want to point out, though, John was still a linebackers coach both of these seasons. He was not a co-defensive coordinator until 2021. And when he got promoted, they moved back up to 26th nationally at 21.7 points per game allowed, with the talent dropping back down to 31st on the team composite. So again, ranking went up, talent went down. Interesting, getting more out of what you have. Right. I do want to also throw in the stats from 22, even though John had left. Obviously, his footprint was still there in some degree, right? Some things they were doing. And we do have to keep in mind, Mark Stoops still had his fingerprints on this defense, right? So there is that factor in all of this stuff. But Kentucky went back to tied for 11th nationally at 19.2 points per game in 2022 with the 26th ranked team talent composite-wise. So talent did go back up, but so did the ranking to a pretty impressive number. So we see that Brad continued to do good things with the defense even after John left, obviously, as I mentioned. So what should we expect from this defense? Besides overall aggression and a willingness to make real contact consistently, right? Quote from Brad White, "We are going to play with our pads," right? That is a quote from him. So they're going to hit some people. I like it. The quote from Miles Graham that I mentioned I would bring up from SEC Media Days told me a ton. It was a very short quote, and I'm just going to paraphrase it. But basically what he said was that they are working on all kinds of different looks and concepts. They would be a different defense from the one you saw last year. Yay. Long story. And not to say that defense was horrible, but it was just so static, so basic. So in terms of like just kind of always doing the same things, right? It wasn't a bad defense. It wasn't very creative. They weren't throwing a lot of things out there, right? We didn't necessarily run the same play every down or anything like we did on offense, but we kind of always had the same concepts. Always two deep safeties, bunch of sim pressures, as you mentioned, right? We mixed up a few things, but we didn't play a lot of man. We played mostly zone. Yeah, maybe some of it was some matching zone instead of just static zone, but still, it just fell flat a lot of times. And when we didn't generate enough turnovers like we did the year before, and we didn't generate as many last year, it really fell flat. So, long story short, I don't think bend, don't break is going to be the vocabulary for this year. More like, wow, did we just break that guy? Because he bent in half. Yeah. Like that. Turn it around. Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
All right, that's all I got. Moving on. What you got?
Love it, love it, love it. Yes, defensive aggression. Great, great term for it as well, because let's hope that's how we come out and we stay. All right, staff overhaul. I want to touch on that. So, yeah, we had over 50 new faces, but not to mention coordinators, okay? I'm going to try and run this off as quickly as I can be. New coordinators and senior staff: John Summerall, head coach; Buster Faulkner, offensive coordinator; Brad White, defensive coordinator; Dave Caldwell, general manager. Positions and assistant coaches. Here we go. Gerald Chapman, the only coach retained, FYI.
Well, that's not new. Okay.
Of the defensive line. Chris Collins, your safeties. Joe Craddock, quarterbacks. Marcus Davis, outside wide receivers. Chris Foster, running backs. Jonathan Galante, special teams coordinator. Greg Gasparato, linebackers. Bam Hardman, outside linebackers. Brandon Harris, quarterbacks, very familiar with UF, brother of Treon Harris. Evan McKissick, tight ends. Trent McKnight, passing game coordinator, inside wide receivers coach. Phil Troutwaite, offensive line coach. Rusty Witt, director of football performance.
16, new.
16. Thanks for the count, B. At the end of the day, when you look at your coaching staff, and when we all know what the team picture looked like in Napier's tenure, where the staff outweighed players, okay, this is a very compact, yet very meaningful and impactful, and not to mention intentional staff. Summerall knows exactly what the job is. He knew what he said at the podium, and he knew exactly the pieces he needed to get to deliver from what he said at the podium. And this is going to be very interesting. B, I thought we had a great point talking offline the other day. I want to bring up something about Billy G. Billy Gonzalez spent 3 different decades, folks, in this program. Billy G, great wide receivers coach, tight end coach, whatever, had some great players, did some great things. But at the end of the day, we just got a massive shot in the arm with new blood. And it's going to be very interesting to see what that new blood does and how it's going to resonate, their message, their schemes, the way that they go about their business. Going to be very interesting how it resonates, not just over the next couple of years, but the next 4 plus, 10 plus years, because a lot of people have come out and said they feel like the last 4 years of Gator football, especially with regards to the talent composite and everything else that happened, was wasted. So, looking very forward to what this staff can do as they get closer to these players, and as that vision and mission is lived out and played out on that field on Saturdays.
Yeah, no, really good points there. You mentioned the Billy G thing. I believe it was either dating back to 17 or 18. I can't remember the year. I think it was 18. Billy G has been the wide receivers coach at Florida every single season except 2022 when it was Kerry Colbert.
I rest my case, Your Honor.
Fun facts there. So, yeah, interesting. All right, moving along. On to the next, wide receivers. Now, as opposed to my last point, which maybe wasn't getting talked about enough, this is getting talked about plenty. Everywhere you look, and for good reason. This is a premier wide receiver room in the country, period. I mentioned last pod, that it was ranked 8th nationally by Athlon, which is certainly strong, but I would argue it's definitively top 5. We don't need to debate the semantics, whatever. The point is, it's very clearly talented. If you don't know already, your starters, BB3, Eric Singleton, Dallas Wilson. And if there's a player in that group that is still maybe flying a little under the radar, I would argue it's Dallas Wilson, which is understandable to a point because of his injuries last season. But I still think it's a pretty big oversight when you look at his performance in the games where he was fully healthy, which is actually only 3 technically played for, but he got hurt early against Georgia. In the 3 he was healthy, he had 11 receptions for 167 yards and 3 touchdowns. Now, granted, bulk of that came against Texas, but he did have a TD catch on the road at Timu as well, which, as much smack as we talk about Timu, that team has a legit defense. Yes, year in and year out, and it was certainly legit last year. So, say what we want, and all the games and poke fun we play with them. Texas A&M, I'll even say their real name, they have a real defense. Mike Elko doesn't mess around when it comes to that. Mm-hmm. So, my excitement to see Dallas fully healthy and full go is difficult to quantify. I am jacked for that, as you well know. I am pumped up about Dallas. Not to say those other guys aren't awesome as well, but man, I cannot wait to see 6 back at it. All right. Behind the starters, you have Micah Mays, spring game monster, which has been indicative of good things in recent years. See Dallas Wilson's spring game last year. There we go. Bailey Stockton is your other backup there. Excellent route runner who knows this offense and concepts from Georgia Tech. And TJ Abrams, who also showed us both at the end of last year and again in the spring game that he has taken steps forward with both his catching ability and some agility traits as well. So, hyper-talented deep room. Not really up for debate. With a new high-level OC, if you aren't anticipating what that's going to look like and what's going to happen there, you probably aren't a Gator fan. And I don't know why you're listening to this pod. So there you go. Yeah, that one's got me hyped up for sure. Wide receiver room is supremely talented. Very high level. Really not much more I need to say.
Well said. And I'm going to move to filling or restoring the swamp. I'm just going to leave it at that.
All right.
When you look at the swamp over the years, obviously it got its nickname. It's got its term from Steve Spurrier back in June of 1992, right? Where he told a USA Today columnist, I believe, or a Gainesville Sun columnist, he said, "We feel comfortable there, but we hope our opponents feel tentative. A swamp is hot, sticky, it can be dangerous. We feel this is an appropriate nickname for our stadium." And not to mention, Florida Field was built on a swamp, right? They had to, they had to dig deep, right? It's dug beneath ground level. They had to put special tubes in there to let water drain out. That's where you have Graham Pond, right? That a lot of that overflow drains out to. But at the end of the day, when you look at the swamp and the 91,000, whatever the number of people it holds, on a fall night, there's just nothing like it, right? When you look at generating the home field intensity with an aggressive physical style of play that aims to make the swamp a feared road destination once again, the product on the field has a lot to do with that. The attitude, the culture, the scheme, and I like what you said earlier about the attitude of a coach is taken on by its team. Okay. And clearly that was one of the things that lacked, right? That definitive killer instinct, closing edge, whatever you want to call it. The swamp needs to be restored. Okay. The mystery, the lore, all the things, especially I love what Summerall said. One of the special traditions of college football is playing won't back down between the third and fourth quarter. And Summerall said, basically, by golly, we will not back down going into the fourth quarter, especially we're not winning in front of our home fans. And at the end of the day, I'm looking forward to John Summerall leading the troops, leading Florida Field on Saturdays and getting this crowd absolutely hyped because that energy, we hope it permeates down to the team. But at the end of the day, I think it's slowly permeating throughout Gator Nation. And guess what? It is getting the Gator Nation going. So in the Summerall era, the swamp will be restored.
Ooh. You said it. You didn't question it. You said it. I like it. Let's see it. Yeah, I want to see it back. A lot of people reference back to that Auburn game, 2019, where P. Ryan took it to the house late in the game to seal it. I was at that game. I feel fortunate to have been at that game. A lot of people say it's the last time the swamp was truly loud.
Kind of loud.
I don't know if it's true that his last time it was truly loud. I think there's some debate on that at times, but it hasn't been rocking like that in a while for sure. There might have been some other moments since then, but it's been few and far between. So yeah, take me back to that for sure, and prior obviously, but yeah, man, no, I like it. Let's get it back. Let's get it back to the days of yore, if you will, in terms of the noise and in terms of the intimidation factor, and certainly it comes pretty easily in there when that team's playing well. We don't mess around when that team is giving us something to get after it for. So
that's
all right. Last but not least, new OC Buster Faulkner. For me, I definitely saved the best for last here. Buddy, no more great value vanilla ice cream on offense. No more doing things that don't make sense. No more finding something that works and then seeing it twice more the rest of the frickin' season. I have full belief that Faulkner will change all of that and more. We are potentially entering a renaissance of offensive football in Gainesville. I mean that. I see the potential for it in spades. And I know we are all here for that. So, let me get into it. Buster, as some of you know, won OC of the Year from Football Scoop last season. But beyond just that, to a man, as I mentioned before, everyone that has talked about him has talked about how he gets the most out of his players. And we discussed with Brad White as well. He didn't exactly have the premier talent pool to work with, yet he still put up some very impressive numbers, right? So just like we were mentioning with Brad White, his numbers at Georgia Tech over the last 3 seasons, 437.7 yards per game, average in 3 seasons at Georgia Tech, former triple option Georgia Tech. Yeah, that's good. 197.8 of that was rushing and averaged 31 points per game over those 3 seasons. That is all per FloridaGators.com. He did this with a team composite talent average per 247 of just above 40th. Not top 15, Not top 20, not top 30, not even technically top 40. It was slightly above 40th as an average.
Let that
sink in. Yeah. Okay. For context, the last time the Gators had those kind of numbers was from 2018 to 2020, Mullen days, when we averaged 35.8 points per game, but had just slightly above the 11th ranked team for talent composite average. It's a little different. Now, granted, points are slightly higher, but I don't know if it's 30 spots higher, right? Okay. I'm not saying there's a direct correlation, as we know there rarely is between those type of statistics, but we know Buster has a creative scheme with solid concepts behind it, things that actually, again, make sense and are not blatantly obvious and have different variants to them. Can't state that enough. And when you add that in to the overachieving element that he's already shown in terms of talent and using his players effectively, again, can't stress that enough. It is certainly hard to see how it's going to be anything but exciting going forward this season. Let's frickin' go. A little bit excited about that one, if you can't tell.
A little? No,
a little bit.
A little bit warranted. More than
if I see that pop off the way I think I could, these pods are going to get a lot more explosive. That's all I know to say. You're going to have to hold me back. It's going to go from therapy to I don't know, some kind of party situation going on. The neighbors are going to be asking, "What's the yelling about?"
Yeah. Hey, you know what?
All right.
And that's a great thing if it does happen. So either way,
man, I hope so. We'll see. But good stuff. With that, we'll close things out.
Yeah.
Really enjoyed doing this as we do each year. It's fun to go through and take a look at these things and really kind of break down, what are the concerns, what are the things we're looking forward to. And again, a little tricky this year because we don't know, exactly what to expect from things. But I think it's still some good talking points for sure. So hope everybody enjoyed it. Thanks for tuning in. Really appreciate it. Thanks for everybody who tuned into the Schedule Pod. Had a ton of people listen to that across all the different platforms. So thank you for that. And I'll turn it over to you to close it out and talk about the next pod.
Absolutely. And B, I couldn't agree more. We appreciate the opportunity to bring this unique perspective and content on Florida football to all of you, and just strictly out of our love for the program, right? And love for Gator football. So with that being said, next pod, August 18, closer and closer to week 1. Where on August 18, we'll be giving you our fall camp update and intel. So look out for that on the 18th of August in a couple of weeks. So let's get out of here. Wherever you are, whatever you may be listening, thank you for taking the time, and we will see you around, Gator Nation.